Hello, my name is Andre Algazi, and I work for the State of California Department of Toxic Substances Control in the Safer Consumer Products program. And this is one of three short lectures that I am doing for Mr. Dudman's environmental law class. This one is an overview of the agency that I work for, the California Environmental Protection Agency. This slide gives you a diagram of the organization of CalEPA. So as you can see, there's the governor, then the secretary for environmental protection, and then under him is a gentleman by the name of Jared Blumenfeld are 6 other boxes, and I'm going to talk about each of those in the subsequent slides. California EPA was formed in 1991 by then Governor Pete Wilson. It's an executive branch agency. It is the secretary is a member of the governor's cabinet. Currently, under the secretary, under CalEPA, there are 3 departments. DTSC, the one I work for, is one of those. 2 state-level boards, an office, and 9 regional boards. I'm going to talk about each of those boards, departments, and office in subsequent slides. The first part of the California EPA that I'd like to give you a brief overview of is the California Air Resources Board, or ARB, or CARB, as some people call it. They have a number of responsibilities related to maintaining or promoting clean air in California. One of the most important ones is setting emission standards for vehicles, for fuels, and for consumer products. For those of you who have cars and have had to have a smog check, that is one element of that requirement is the smog check program. They also set health-based air quality standards that shouldn't be exceeded, and they're designed to protect human health, so that if the level of a pollutant is below the threshold, then it should be protective of human health. They also have a research division that does air quality related research. They have a monitoring responsibility, so they actually collect and analyze samples of air from around the state. They have a couple of their own labs, one located in Sacramento and the other in Southern California. They also set and identify and set control measures for toxic air contaminants, predominantly from industrial facilities that emit those types of contaminants. They have a compliance assistance function, an education and outreach function, and they oversee and assist the local air quality management districts or air pollution control districts that have responsibility for protecting the air in their jurisdictions. So they also have an enforcement function, which I didn't include on this slide. The second branch or part of the California EPA tree is the Department of Pesticide Regulation, or DPR, and like ARB, they have a number of different responsibilities. One of the big ones is evaluating pesticides and registering them for use. So they will also license the people that apply pesticides, who sell pesticides, consultants, and other pesticide professionals. So they have a licensing and certification requirement. They also have a risk assessment group, and they keep statistics on injuries and illnesses related to exposure to pesticides. And related to that, they will determine and set what are safe workplace practices to prevent injury and illness caused by pesticides. In addition, DPR monitors health and environmental impacts of pesticides that have already been registered, and in some cases the registration of certain pesticides can be revoked if there are problems. They also have a program to test fresh fruits and vegetables that they purchase either at wholesale or retail outlets to see what levels of pesticide residues they contain. And they also have an education element to promote integrated pest management practices, which encourages minimal use of chemical pesticides in conjunction with other practices to control pests, not just with chemicals, basically. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about CalRecycle, or the Department of Resources, Recycling, and Recovery. It's a department, it's the newest department in CalEPA, formed about 10 years ago out of the former Integrated Waste Management Board and the Division of Recycling from, I think, Department of Conservation. So those two elements were merged to make CalRecycle. So the department has a number of responsibilities that are related to solid waste and reducing the amount of waste going to landfills. One of them that you may be familiar with is the CRV program, or Beverage Container Recycling Program, that we all pay into when we buy bottled and canned beverages. They also have a program that is supposed to divert or promote the diversion of solid waste by 75%. The program was enacted by legislation in 2011, and I think 2011 may have been the baseline year. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find up-to-date information on CalRecycle's website on whether or not the 75% diversion goal has been met or not. The idea was that instead of sending things to landfill, we Californians would reduce the amount of waste we generate, and of the waste we did generate, recycle more of it or compost more of it. CalRecycle also has responsibility for several recycling programs, all of which were created by legislation that was adopted over the last 10 or 15 years, including used oil collection for do-it-yourself oil changers, paint collection, which is run by an NGO that's funded by the paint industry, electronic waste recycling, which is funded by a fee we all pay when we buy things with a screen on them, and mattress recycling, which, like the paint recycling program, is an organization that is run and funded by the mattress industry, overseen by CalRecycle. Some of the other things that CalRecycle does is to promote extended producer responsibility. So the paint and mattress programs I just spoke about are kind of examples of that. And the idea is that the companies that produce and put items into commerce that are hard to deal with at end of life, that are a burden on landfills and local governments to deal with, that those companies should have some responsibility for the end of life management, rather than essentially passing on the cost to society at large, to us who pay taxes and fees to dispose of our waste. So they generally promote that concept of EPR, extended producer responsibility. They also help fund collection of household hazardous waste by local government agencies. Typically, a city or county will have either a permanent household hazardous waste collection facility or periodically hold temporary collection events. They also have a responsibility to oversee local agencies that issue permits to landfills and transfer facilities. So essentially, any facility that's set up and designed and run to deal with waste, whether it's a landfill or a transfer station, needs to have a permit, and CalRecycle sets standards for and oversees the local agencies that issue those permits. The fourth element of CalEPA that I'd like to talk about is the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, OHHA. That's how we pronounce it. OHHA is the smallest part of CalEPA. There might be maybe 100 people in the whole agency, and they're all sort of highly educated toxicologists who research the hazards of chemicals that people in California might be exposed to. And they support other agencies that use the results of those risk assessments to, for example, set standards for drinking water or ambient air quality or things like that. So one of their more visible programs is the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act of 1986, or more commonly called Proposition 65. That is the law that was enacted by the voters in 1986 that is responsible for all of the signage that we see around California, warning us that the area we are in contains a chemical known to the state of California to cause cancer or reproductive harm. And I've seen these signs everywhere, even at Starbucks. There's a warning about baked goods containing a chemical known to cause cancer. So you really, it's hard to get away from those chemicals, I think. So OHHA compiles and maintains the list of substances that need to have those warning signs on them. And you might also have noticed at grocery stores in the last couple of years, I've noticed that at the checkout stand, there'll be a sign saying canned food may contain bisphenol A, which is known to the state of California to cause reproductive harm. In addition to those elements, OHHA also develops health protective exposure levels for contaminants in air, water, and soil, often in conjunction with other agencies within CalEPA. They also set or establish fish consumption advisories for fish that's caught by recreational anglers in California. So various water bodies throughout the state are contaminated with different pollutants. One of the common ones is mercury or methyl mercury, and therefore, based on risk assessment calculations, they will issue advisories saying that an adult should eat no more than 2 servings of this type of fish from this lake or river. A pregnant woman maybe shouldn't have any at all. The children should maybe have 1 serving a week, things like that. So those advisories are all based around risk assessments that take into account the concentration of the contaminant in the fish and the level that will lead to in the person and the threshold of them for harm to the person. They are also one of 3 agencies that implements the Biomonitoring California program. It's an interesting program. It's underfunded chronically, but the focus of Biomonitoring California is to actually measure the level of chemicals in people by analyzing samples of, for example, blood or serum or adipose tissue or urine, things like that. And it's quite interesting to see the extent to which we're exposed to chemicals from our environment and from the products we use. And the other 2 agencies that implement that program are Department of Toxic Substances Control, which is the one I work for, and the California Department of Public Health, which is not part of California EPA, but the 3 of us, DPH, DTSC, and OHHA, implement Biomonitoring California. If you're interested in that program, they have summaries of all their findings and the different programs on the Biomonitoring California website. Next, I'll talk about the State Water Resources Control Board. They have 3 major program areas. The first focuses on water quality. So they regulate stormwater and wastewater treatment effluents, site cleanup, and underground tanks. They have an enforcement function. So essentially, all of those things that I just listed could contribute to contamination of the waters of California. Second, they have a financial assistance element, which provides loans and grants to construct facilities, clean up releases from leaking tanks, things like that. And as well, they have a water rights function, which issues permits to allow people to use water, specifying the amounts and the conditions, construction timetables for diversion and storage of water, and things like that. So the idea being that Californians, it's a resource that belongs to all Californians. So they're, through issuing permits, trying to be good stewards of our water. There are also regional water quality control boards, 9 of them in California. The boundaries of the water boards are based on the watersheds that they're located in. And each of the boards the members of each of the boards are appointed by the governor. They will set water quality requirements based on the climate of the watershed, the topography, the types of geology, and things like that. They also will set waste discharge requirements and issue permits, as well as enforce compliance with permits for facilities that discharge pollutants or wastewater into the waters of California. And then those sort of nutshell descriptions brings us to the 6th part of CalEPA, which is Department of Toxic Substances Control, which is the department that I work for. And on this slide, each of these pictures kind of represents a part of what our program does. And I'm going to go into the major programs in DTSC and finally sort of talk about the one I work in. The first of DTSC's programs I would like to talk about briefly is Brownfields and Environmental Restoration. It may be the largest, or it's either the largest or the second largest program. Within the department, we have a total of 1,000 people or so, and about 400 are in brownfields and environmental restoration. Their main responsibility is overseeing the cleanup of contaminated sites. And typically, sites can become contaminated with hazardous substances, either through improper hazardous waste disposal or management of hazardous waste, or just other activities where hazardous materials were handled carelessly and ended up being released. And the other big program in the department, which is similar in size, maybe 300 people, is hazardous waste management. They have a regulatory function, which is to sort of set the standards and enforce them for hazardous waste facilities, generators, people who actually produce hazardous waste while they're doing whatever their activity is, maybe some industrial activity, people who transport hazardous waste, and facilities that receive hazardous waste and do treatment or storage or land disposal of hazardous waste. The destination facilities are managed under permits, so they issue permits for treatment, storage, and disposal facilities, which are very extensive documents that, for example, require the analysis under the California Environmental Quality Act. The permits are vetted through a public comment process, and there tend to be community meetings, so it's kind of a big deal to get a hazardous waste permit. They also implement regulations and to promote legitimate recycling of hazardous waste. The word legitimate is important because the balance is to try to reuse or reclaim hazardous waste rather than disposing of it, but to do so in a way that's actually adding value or it's beneficially being recycled. There are a lot of people who have creative ideas for quote unquote recycling that may actually be just a cheaper way to get rid of something. So they have to sort of interpret what people are doing who want to take advantage of those regulatory exemptions to make sure that it's legitimate. The last two program areas within DTSC that I'd like to talk about are Safer Consumer Products and the Environmental Chemistry Lab. Safer Consumer Products program is the smallest and newest program within DTSC. I work in that program and I have quite a lot to say about it, so I have a whole separate lecture that should be on the same portal that you're listening to this lecture on. So I encourage you to check that out, and I go into some detail about the program, its framework, the process that we follow, and the products and chemicals that we are looking into currently. Also, then we have the Environmental Chemistry Lab, and that lab is actually two facilities, one located in Berkeley, the other in Pasadena. They support the other programs within the department. So a lot of their work involves testing of soil, water, and air samples that were collected at sites that DTSC regulates, as well as samples collected by our enforcement program during inspections of permitted facilities, for example. They also are part of Biomonitoring California. I mentioned that earlier when I was talking about OHHA. Our laboratory does some of the analysis of samples collected from people in California. They also do consumer products testing. For example, they've been involved with efforts to test children's jewelry for toxic metals. They've tested foam mattress and upholstered furniture foam for flame retardants that are supposed to be properly labeled. They've been doing some other testing of nail products, like nail polishes, for example, in support of safer consumer products and other things like that. So for some of these less routine types of work, they do need to develop new analytical methods. So you can't just sort of turn on the analytical instrument and inject a sample. A lot of times there's a lot of work that's required to get the method established and make sure that it's giving you the right results when it says you have a certain amount of a contaminant. So that's another one of their major program areas. So that is my nutshell, quick 20-minute overview of California Environmental Protection Agency. I'm going to dive deeper into the Safer Consumer Products program in that lecture, as I mentioned, so I encourage you to check that out as well. Thank you.